2000 Toyota Rav4 driver's side CV axle and transmission seal. This is a four-wheel drive automatic. This isn't a particularly difficult job, but it helps if you have a few specialized tools that I'll show. And there are some tight bolts, especially the axle nut here. It's 159 foot-pounds is the torque value on that. Quick rundown of how this job's going to go, and you're going to see all of these steps. First step is going to be to lift the whole front end of the vehicle so that both wheels are off the ground. Then we'll remove this axle nut. If you have ABS, we'll just take out that little speed sensor. And then we will disconnect the fasteners for this sway bar link or stabilizer link. And then we'll disconnect the tie rod from the knuckle right there. And just remove these fasteners with a ball joint on the bottom of the control arm. That'll allow this whole knuckle to swing out so that we can disconnect it from the CV axle. Then we're going to use a slide hammer to knock the CV axle out of the transmission. There's a seal back here that's leaking on this Rav4 that you don't see in the picture. We'll pull that seal out and then we'll put everything back together. Now before you start pulling parts, make sure that you have the proper replacement parts, because the Rav4 has 5 different transaxles that it came with. And the way you find out which one you have is you come in here on your driver's side and you look down at your VIN plate. And right here on the bottom of the VIN plate, you'll see this code, that's the transmission, and that there is the model code. So both of these numbers can help you to make sure that you're getting the proper replacement axle. The Rav4 has a transaxle, and a transaxle is a transmission that incorporates the front diff. So when we're pulling the axle out, we're pulling out of the transaxle. The fluid that comes out is going to be transmission fluid. So you're going to need to have on hand about a quart of whatever type of transmission fluid you have, whether it's your gear oil in a manual transmission or if it's ATF in your automatic. And you also want to make sure that you're getting the proper axle for your Rav4, because I'm aware of at least 3 different types of CV axles for the Rav4. There's one that has the 23 splines on the inside, or 26, and there's one with 21 and 24. They don't fit just any Rav4, so you need to make sure when you buy yours that you tell them what kind of setup you have. Is it 2-wheel drive? Is it 4-wheel drive? Is it a pre-96, is it a pre-98 or post-98, all that info. Also, you want to make sure you tell them whether you have ABS or not, because you want to get an axle that has an ABS ring on it if you do have ABS. And lastly, of course, if you're pulling an axle from a yard, from a junkyard, make sure that you are pulling from the same transaxle, and again, whether it has ABS or whatnot. You could just compare the VIN plates like I just showed. If it has the same transmission as you, then you can pull the axles out and use them on yours. We'll next be removing the tire, but break those lug nuts free before you lift it. That is a 21mm. Chalk your tires. Now I want to lift the vehicle. If we come under the front here, this cross member, which is the same on 2-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive Rav4s. This is a lift point for a floor jack. You can put a piece of wood about right here and lift up here with your floor jack. That'll lift up the whole front end. And then depending what kind of jack stands you have, you can use this pinch weld right here on either side. You can see where other people have bent it down, like at tire shops and stuff. You can support it right here on jack stands. What I usually do is just use the regular jack stands and put them right here on this connection for the control arm. My lift is gonna go like this. Put a piece of wood on the floor jack, and when you got the wood, make sure that you don't smush this bolt right here. You're only going to have this if you have automatic transmission. That's the shifter cable thing. Put this wood right about there, and then bring this jack up. Make sure I got that centered okay. That looks good. Alright, I'm off the ground over here. That'll do it. Don't put your fingers underneath, in between those two, in case it falls and smashes your fingers. Same deal on the other side. I'm on the passenger side now. I just like to put this little thing under there. That's where I want to be, right there. And on the other side of that, not on top of that bolt. Your jack stands may be different. And the same deal over on that side. And everything is good and locked in. Double check that your jack stands are locked in, and then we'll drop it. Okay, double checking that your jack stands are exactly where they need to be. Let's just go ahead and very slowly release the floor jack here until we get the weight settled on those jack stands. And there it is there. Okay, there's nothing on the floor jack, but safety first. I'm going to go ahead and get the floor jack up on here too. Okay, wheel is up off the ground now. You can take the wheel off. If this is the first time you've been back here, this is the brake rotor. This is the caliper. These are brake pads back here. Get a better angle. So there's your tie rod. This here is the sway bar link. It's real short on the Rav4. This is the sway bar. This is the lower control arm. Back here is the CD axle. And that goes to that other boot, which goes into the transmission. Goes into the transmission. Now if we move to the front, if I just kind of go under like this, so this is the back of the caliper. There's another look at the CD axle here. This big castellated nut is for the ball joint right here. This is the ABS speed sensor. You're only going to have this if you have ABS, and that's the sensor itself down there. So there is a 10 millimeter. I'm going to take that 10 millimeter out, and then the sensor pulls out. So I'm just going to work it back and forth, and then it just pulls out. Okay, and there it is. So this is a good time to clean that off. I just clean that up a little bit so you can see how this works. You can see the tip, and that goes in here and into that hole there. And it's just the right height so that it can detect those little notches on the CV axle. So this part stays on the hub. This obviously is on the knuckle, so none of this moves, but the CV axle here is going to move and spin around. And those little lines there, like that one line you can see, it's going to spin around, and that will indicate the speed to this sensor. It's like a Hall effect sensor. I'm going to remove this here, that's a 10 millimeter, and that will allow me to pick this whole bracket up. You can reach that bolt with an extension. This whole bracket will come. And then you can take this and I'm just going to loop a piece of wire and tie it up here to the spring. So that's out of my way now. Now we're going to do this axle nut. The axle nut is behind this little cover. So to get to here, we just have to remove this little cotter key. And you see how it's just pushed through and then bent. So I'm going to take a pliers, bend this back, and then tap the key out. Now I'm going to get some PV Blaster, penetrating oil, and I'm going to spray it in this hole. Just try not to get it on the brake rotor. If you do, clean it off with brake cleaner. Don't reuse this. They're like 50 cents at Home Depot. Now this little cover will pull right off. Now we got to work on this little boy. 6.30 millimeter deep socket. This is a 6.30 millimeter socket. It's a deep socket because it's got to get on there and clear that. So I don't know, shallow socket probably wouldn't work. This is a 1/2 inch drive. You can pick one of these up at Harbor Freight. What you can do, there's a few different ways. If you have an impact, you can hit this with an impact and you'll be good. If you don't have an impact, you can use this socket with a 1/2 inch drive breaker bar, and you can have someone step on the brakes inside the vehicle, and that will, the brakes will hold the disc from turning, and then you can crack this open. If you don't have somebody to help you, you can put the lug nuts on here and use a pry bar as your sort of helper. And if none of those methods will work for you, the other thing you can do is you can pop this center cap off. You just reach under and pop it up, or you pry right here. Take this center cap off, then you put the wheel back on, put the lug nuts back on, and lower the car. And then once the wheel is touching the ground, the tire is touching the ground, it will prevent the wheel from turning, and you can put your socket on here and break that free. To use the pry bar, I'm going to take a couple of these lug nuts and I'm going to put them back on. And this is just to protect the threads. Alright, there I have the pry bar under this lug and on top of this one. Let's see. Okay, the wheel isn't moving, so I'm going to give it a go. See if I can crack this. There it is. So that will do it for your situation if you're working alone. And I'm going to spray this back here right now with some PB Blaster to let it continue to soak while we move down. Next we'll move underneath. I'm just going to get in here and I'm going to spray it. Now disconnect this. That's a 12 millimeter. Alright, so now we'll remove this sway bar link here. And you only need to remove one of these nuts, but it is sometimes easier if you remove both. If you just remove one, you'll be able to swing it out. Now this is an aftermarket sway bar link. I replaced this a while ago. So these are 19 millimeter with a H5. So this is a H5 or Hex 5 that fits in here. But on the Toyotas, this will be a H6 and a 17 millimeter. Now these can be tricky to remove, so you want to spray this with a whole bunch of PB Blaster. If you have an impact, I suggest you just get a 17 millimeter 6-point socket and hammer this nut. And hopefully that'll break it free. If you don't have an impact, then you're going to want to get a hex, because the tendency is for this to spin. So the hex will allow you to prevent the ball from spinning. So I'm going to get some PB Blaster on here. Alright, so I'm going to put this 19 millimeter on in my case. I'm going to put it kind of high up here so I can swing the sledgehammer. I'll be hitting right here. And then I'll go in with my breaker bar and my hex. Alright, so that's position that's going to lock out at the control arm once that gets turning. And now I'm going to whack this thing with the sledgehammer. Watch yourself that you don't hit anything you're not supposed to hit, especially like your hand. I'll get in here, okay. And there it goes, cool. Alright. Well, maybe not quite. There we go. Okay, so it'll be pretty tight. Okay, so now this is loose, and I can back this off now. This is my 3/8 inch Ryobi cordless, and usually if I just hammer and hammer, it'll come off. There it goes. So you can see the impact is really nice. And then once you just have these two fasteners out, you can just pull the sway bar link out just like that. I replaced these, gosh, I think last year or the year before, and they still look good, so I will reuse these. And now we'll do the tie rod end right here. This is a 17 millimeter. I already removed the cotter key. 17 millimeter 6-point with the 24-inch breaker bar. There it is. Okay, not too bad. Now to get this tie rod out of the knuckle here, you can take this nut and put it on upside down. This one's not going on so easily upside down. If I put it this way, I can do it. And I can smack that with the hammer. Put a piece of wood there, and then you bang, 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 and it'll come out. I'm going to use this tool. This is a rental from AutoZone, tie rod end remover, 27276. I've used these many times before, and I really like them. And this is a great tool because you can use this to separate without actually destroying the boot. That's how this works. We're just going to open it up enough so that we can get the bottom of the bolt right here, and then slide these in between this point on the knuckle and the boot. And you can get it on there in a way that it's nice and firm. And then I'm going to put a ratchet on here on this particular one. It's a 19 millimeter. I'm going to turn this. Yeah, I put a little PB blaster on there too. There it is. See? Isn't that great? And now it comes right out. I would recommend you just go ahead and rent this tool. Back towards the front, there is the ball joint, and there are the fasteners. You can see we got 2 nuts, and it looks like that is a bolt there. Okay, those are all 17 millimeter. I'm going to grab a 6-point 17 millimeter and get on here, and I'm going to turn counterclockwise. So remember, you're looking at it upside down, so it's going to look opposite ways to you. Let's see if I can crack this. There it goes. Okay, not too bad. Okay, I say not too bad, but I'm using a 24-inch breaker bar, so the suckers are on there pretty tight. There we go. All right. And now we're going to push the control arm down to see if we can pry that out. We'll use the pry bar again. Just going to pry this out. There we go. Okay. Okay. Well, I intended to show you how to get this out, but mine actually just pushes right out. Yours probably won't be so easy to do. I literally just pushed it by hand. What you normally would have to do would be to tap it out some. So you'll take your big nut, because you don't want to mess up your threads, and you'll screw it on here, and then you use a plastic hammer and you tap, 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 and it'll come out the back. You don't want to use a metal hammer, just use a plastic hammer. If you don't have a plastic hammer, put a little piece of wood there, and then tap your regular hammer onto the wood, and that will push the shaft back. Or maybe you'll get lucky and yours will just push back with your palm. So now that the CV axle can move back, I'm going to try to see if I can pull it out. Just like that. And as you can see, with those two components disconnected, the sway bar link and the tie rod end, I can really move this out of the way, and then I just put a little board there between the control arm and the bottom of the knuckle there. So I have a really clear view of this, and I can also get in here with the slide hammer and really get a good grip on it. Loop a wire around your CV axle and bring it up and tie it off here, and that'll give you a free hand. Now this is where it can get a little tricky. You see the wire is holding the CV axle here. You're looking at the other end of the CV axle, and that's going into the transmission. And normally on a CV axle you'd get behind it and you would just find a spot to pry, but there's a lot of stuff in the way on a Rav4. This is one of the things that's in the way. So we're going to remove this little shield here. This is a plastic shield. I'm going to hit those each with some PB Blaster. Those are 12 millimeter. Suckers are tight. Oh man, those suckers are real tight. That's one of them, but it's just got a little rusty. I actually just used my little Ryobi 3/8 inch to get that out. I don't think I'm gonna be able to get that big thing back there for that other one, so let's figure out how to grab that other one by hand. That little sucker ended up being harder to remove in time and effort than the axle nut. That's kind of funny, but I'm going to give you the trick so it doesn't take you forever like it took me. Get your extension, that's an 8-inch extension with your 6.12 millimeter on the end, and get your breaker bar and put it right back here in this position. Alright? Okay, like that. And then break this free. Okay, with those two fasteners out, this plastic cover will come right off. Okay, I changed the setup with the wood here to give myself a little bit more space. Now, when we get the CV axle out, a little bit of transmission fluid is going to leak, so put a little pan down there. Now have a look at this here. The CV axle, you can rotate it. Okay, just grab it right here and you can turn it. I need 2 hands to do it, but it's not that difficult. And the reason you're going to want to turn it is because there's a C-clip that's holding this shaft into the transmission. And that C-clip, right, so it's shaped like that, you want it to be in just the right position to allow you to more easily pull it out. These shafts are kind of notorious for being difficult to remove. Where I have my finger right here is not where you want to pry. You want to pry back there in that little groove in the steel. That there is the groove where you want to try to put your tool. Okay, so I have the notch on the TV axle up the center of it up at about 12 o'clock. I have the wood, the 2x4 behind it, and I'm coming in at an angle with this gooseneck, and I'm going to see if I can pop it out with this. It feels like I got a bite, but it's so easy to slip on this. Here we go. Since prying just doesn't work for me, I'm going to use this. This is a slide hammer, and I got this rental at Advance Auto. It is called Power Built Kit 41. This is what's inside, and this attachment in particular is the one I'm going to use. This works really well, fits right in that groove, and you're going to put it on the slide hammer like this direction, not that direction. I'm going to put it on this direction. So just grab the slide hammer and this one piece and turn it so it's this way. I'm going to get in here with the end on the slide hammer and give it a couple whacks. Here's my little practice run. I'm pretty clear. It's as far as I can get the hammer back. Let's go. That's not it. I'm going to turn the CV axle and see if I can get it at another spot. Oops, not there. You don't want to hammer there. Right in there. Okay. There we go. I got a better grip right there. Oops. that's it. Hooray! And I'm not losing too much transmission fluid. And I can pull it out. Okay, there we go. Have a look there while it's draining. Here's the axle. Now this is a little bit heavier than it looks, so I think it is a good idea to use the wire while you're working with the slide hammer. This axle is in really good shape, and I'm not planning on replacing this axle. I'm just going in here to get that transmission seal. On the four-wheel drive, manual and automatic transmissions, there are 23 splines on the transmission side. And that little clip there, that's what was holding it in. Now the reason why it worked to turn the CB axle is because you're not going to know where this little clip is. And as you can see, if the clip is facing down like this, you're not going to get this CB axle out because gravity's pulling it down and it's catching. So if you turn the axle and with it you turn the ring and you end up somewhere around like here, you can see that's going to be easier to pull it out. This is the same deal when you go to put this CB axle in. You don't want to try to put it in when you have the clip on the bottom like that. You want to have the clip on the top like that when you go to push it in, because you're just going to snap this thing in and that's all that's going to be holding it. And then you're going to tug on it, make sure you can't pull it out by hand, and that's how you know it's in. Now this is where we had the slide hammer right here on this. Don't accidentally miss it and start trying to drive it out from here. Another thing that I saw on YouTube, if you can't get the slide hammer just to grab it, is go around this with a chain. So loop a chain around it and then put the slide hammer in such a way that you can grab the chain with the slide hammer and pull it. That will probably be especially helpful if you're working on an aftermarket axle, because I've read that the aftermarket axles don't have as much to bite into right here. And in the slide hammer kit, I think that would work well to use with a chain. The slide hammer definitely does work. Now, if you've never used a slide hammer before, it's very easy to use, but just a couple things. Don't put your hand here because this hammer comes back and it's going to smush your fingers. So you want to keep your hand back here. You can put this however you like it, whatever. I'm right-handed, so I had my right hand on here because it's my stronger hand, and then move this back with the left hand. You're going to get it right in here on this groove, just like I showed. And the other thing that's kind of important is when you put the slide hammer in, don't just set it down and don't push it forward. Pull it back. So you're going to, even before you move the hammer, you're going to be trying to bite back on that. And then when you strike it, it's going to give that impact. Okay? Now if you don't actively pull it back, it's going to skip. Pull it back like that. Okay, this is my exact setup. So I have that 2x4 right there, pushing the wheel hub out. I was right here and pretty much able to keep it straight. This is where the camera was, so that's your reference for where you're looking, where the camera was. I'm going to replace this transmission seal, axle seal, output seal, whatever you want to call it. And so I'm going to get a really good idea of exactly how it's seated. So I put it in properly, and when I film my finger right here, it is flush. So I'm going to get some good pictures of that so that when I put the seal back in, I put it in the right way. So there's a closer look there. It is an NOK, and I'll put the part number that I can read there on the screen, and the Toyota part number as well. I'm going to replace it with the NOK. get another 20 years out of it. But you can see how this was just starting to leak, probably within the last year or so, with this grime that got on here, like that. Now we'll pull this seal. Before you pull the seal, and there's a few different ways you can do it, you might want to reach your hand in here carefully and peel back. You'll see a spring like this, and pull this spring out. You don't have to do this, but this way you won't lose track of this because you don't want to accidentally leave that in there and miss it later. So now to pull this seal out, there's a baffle behind it, and you want to leave the baffle in place and just take the seal out. Toyota recommends using on this side, since there's not a lot of room, they recommend using the slide hammer with the seal puller attachment to get right behind here and whack it out. You could also use a pry. You can get in there with a pry, but the problem is, see, there isn't a whole lot of room. I'll come up the bottom here between the transmission pan and the control arm. Now, I don't know what this is going to look like on your manual transmission. You might not have this path. So I'll just put this there, right there. And I'm going to go in and under. Stay close to the seal. You're not going to go behind the seal. You want to stay you are going to go behind the seal. You're not going to go behind the baffle. And let's see if I can pop this out now. There it is. That's what I mean about not getting behind this. You don't want to pop this out with it. Just the seal. Here's the seal. Here's the path I took. Alright, I went under here with the long pry and snuck right behind there. Here's the old seal. There's the part number. This is original Toyota seal. No surprise, it's an NOK. And NOK seals are outstanding, so I'm replacing with the same. This is an NOK seal, BH3680E. I got the part from Advance Auto. I knew in advance it was an NOK seal, even though it's sold under National Seal's label and part number. So National Seal 710115. When you get the box, it'll look like this. It'll say National Seals on there, which is Federal Mogul, and it'll have their part number 710115. But when you open it up, it'll be an NOK seal, and you can see right there, made in Japan. That's because it's NOK. Compare your new seal and your old seal and make sure they're exactly the same. Obviously, if you have a same part number on it from the same company, that's a good thing. And check the quality of your new seal. Make sure this shaft spring here is in place, and make sure you don't have any damage on the lip. Toyota recommends using this SST special service tool to drive that. I don't have that, so I'll improvise. And the seal depth, as you can see, is 0 plus or minus half a millimeter. So we're just going to try to get that flush with the transmission case. Before you put the seal in, you're just going to go in there and just clean it up. ATF is a pretty good cleaner, so you can just use the ATF that's in there to kind of rub around the edge. Just get some of that out of your way. It's going to continue leaking like that. These little shaft springs are kind of notorious for popping out. So a little trick that you might want to consider, take a little grease and run some grease around it, and that'll make it less likely that it'll pop out. You're going to have to put MP grease on the inside lip of the seal anyway. So just do the spring and the inside lip. And I'm going to stick this in. And you want to make sure you're driving this evenly, because it's going to be easy to overdrive it, especially on the bottom, since there's going to be more fluid there, because the way the transmission fluid is leaking out. You'll watch very carefully so as to not overdrive this. I'm just going to tap it in a little bit at a time. See, it's going in more over there already, so I gotta go in here. I don't want it to go in crooked, and it's really easy to get these in crooked. Okay, still got a little, so I gotta get that side in a bit more. I just added a extension to give myself a little more room back here. There's a lot of stuff in the way. Now I can still feel all the way around a lip, and we want to get that pretty much flush. I'm just barely tapping it because I don't want to overdrive this, and need a little more. You can hear that it's tapping onto the metal. If you listen. I gotta get this side in a little more. Okay, it's in, it looks good. I can rub my finger all the way around and it is flush. This is a big seal, so make sure you're going slow and not overdriving it in one corner versus the other. Okay, there it is, in place. So here was my setup. I just had some extensions, daisy chained, and I was tapping here and just hitting the back with a plastic hammer. I gotta do a little work on this wheel hub while I'm in here. This wheel, when it's very, very cold, and I mean very cold, it's gotta be under about 10. When I first start up and start moving, it'll make this noise. It sounds like this. It matches my speed. And it'll just hold on just for a little while until it warms up, and then it won't come back. And so I'm thinking I got a little empty spot in here. So that's what I did there. I took out the old grease. I just went in there with my finger and took out as much as the old grease, and then I used a pick to get in there and get the old grease out, and then I went in with some new grease, and I got to clean it up a little bit more, but that's what I'm going to try. I'm going to run with that. This is the grease I used here. I haven't used this before, so we'll see. It's Lucas Extra Heavy Duty Grease. Perfect for wheel bearings. I'm putting this axle back in. This is the original axle. It's still in great shape. I have no reason to replace it, so I'm not going to. I am going to clean the end though with a little bit of brake cleaner. This is the transmission side. You can see the C-clip is on there. I'm also going to clean the other end of the wheel end because I had a little bit of PB Blaster on there. And you don't want any kind of lubrication on these because you don't want your axle nut to back out any. Now, if like me, you're going to reuse your CV axle, you're going to want to clean it up real well so you can make sure that you don't miss any tears in the boots. These Toyota axles are really, really high quality. They cost a fortune though, so I'd probably replace it with an aftermarket just because they're so expensive. Just feel it, make sure it feels good. Make sure you're not leaking any grease down here at the band or up here, this part here. The grease will start to come out of there if it gets bad. And then on the wheel side, same deal. So just inspect it really well. Now Toyota recommends that this snap ring is replaced, and so if you have another snap ring, go ahead and change it out. If you don't, then just take a good look at it, and you can probably use it again, especially if you've only pulled your axle once. To get this ring off, I'm just going to go on the back part and pull it up with the pick. You can see it's coming up. Let's get it all the way off. You don't want to mess up the splines. Don't use anything that's going to mess up the splines. And there it is. There's the old one there, and here's the new one. And you can see it really didn't change size much at all. It's pretty much the same. And the old one's just a little bit more open, which this new one probably will do in the process of putting it on. Put a little transmission fluid on here to lubricate that a little bit, and slip this new one on. Pop it in. Do it quickly. Okay, and there it is. And there is the part number for the snap rings, which are the same on the left and right side, at least on this all-wheel drive automatic. So talk to your dealer and double check if it's different on yours. Now I'm not doing the passenger side axle on this Rav4, but this is a passenger side axle for a automatic 4-wheel drive. Not sure if it's the same axle on the manual transmission. You can see it's very similar, but there is an O-ring down here. This seal is different, and the shaft seal is different. On the right side, there's a bearing that this goes into in the differential part of the transaxle, and the seal, it doesn't come out the same way. You have to pry with a screwdriver, is the way you get that other seal out. But it has the same snap ring. Part number is the same for the snap ring, and I'll give you the part number for this O-ring here. And again, now this is only for the passenger side, the right side axle if you're doing that, but there is the part number for that O-ring. Now it's time to install this axle. I'm just going to take a little grease, little MP grease here, and I'm going to put it on this C-clip, and that will keep it, I'll keep it from moving around, because we want it not to fight us when you install it, right? So just put it like that. And installing it, you don't want to make sure that C-clip is on the top. So like that, not with the open part facing up. You want the open part facing down, and that way it's not going to fight you. If you're installing it and it's fighting you, then pull it out and double check that that clip didn't move, so it's hanging upside down. Same deal as it was trying to get it out, how we turned it and whatnot. Before we put the shaft in, I'm going to just take a little MP grease and go around this inner lip here, like that. If you don't have MP grease, you can use transmission fluid. Get on there like that. Look at the clip and make sure it's in the right place, like about like that. And when you go in, you're going to be lining it up with the splines, but you obviously have to do it blind. So see how it's in right? It's not in right now because I can turn it. Just kind of turn it until you feel it grab onto the splines. There it is. Just grab it onto the spline. You can hear it and you can feel it. So it's in there right now. That's where the camera was just hanging. The wire is pushing it in. If you just hang it with the wire here, it'll pop out again, and you have to just redo it. Now with it like this, I'm going to push this in and strike the end here with a hammer to get that to pop into place. If you're real strong, you might be able to just give it a good jerk and get it in place, and then you want to make sure it's in there, that the clip is behind where it needs to be, and that you can't pull it up by hand. And you can see it's not in all the way. So we're going to push it all the way in. I'll put a piece of wood here to protect this, and then strike the wood with a sledgehammer, small sledgehammer. And now I'm going to strike this and okay. And now I'm going to grab it back here and I'm going to pull it. You shouldn't be able to pull it out. Okay, can't pull it out. So when you're testing it, don't grab the other end of the shaft and try to pull this, because you don't want to mess this. You don't want to mess this up here. Grab this and try to pull it out, and it won't. And then turn it. As you can see, it's on there. And so we're all set. Okay, let's see the axles back in. I just had the wood here, and then I struck the wood with this small sledge. Now we can start putting this thing back together. Grab the shield, and these are the two bolts for that. Those are both 12mm. I put some anti-seize on those bolts because those were very hard to remove. Those are back in place. Now we'll get the CV axle back into the hub. Take this wood out and get this wire out of my way. Pull this towards myself. Turn the axle and get it in. And then same deal, it's got to line up. So you've got to get the splines in, right? If it's not lined up right, it won't go in all the way. Like, see how it's not lined up right? So I'm going to pull it out. Just slightly turn it. Haven't quite got it in there, just see that? I might have to turn it up a little. You can either turn the CV axle or slightly turn the hub. You gotta kind of make sure that you're pointing the splines. So there it goes. You gotta, it tends to kind of go down. When you're putting it and you're looking through here, make sure that you don't have it sort of pointing down a little bit like that, because it's gonna bottom out. Make sure that you're putting it in straight and then it'll get all the way through. Just gonna partially put the axle nut on just a little bit, just to prevent the CV axle from popping out while we go down and do the fasteners for the ball joint. All right, gotta get the ball joint studs up on top of this control arm. So it's gonna take some prying to do that. You're gonna have to pull it back and then pry this down. Get up like that, and there we go. Just enough to get it started. Pushing it out. I have to get that one. There it is. Okay. I'll give this a little bit of encouragement. Down here we have these two nuts and the bolt, and this is the bolt. These are all 17 millimeter. Our torque on these is 94 foot-pounds. Pretty tight. Now we'll do the stabilizer link, the sway bar link here, and that's these two nuts here. There's no up or down to the sway bar link. You can put it in either way. There we go. Torque on these is going to be 54 foot-pounds, and this is where you're going to need that 5 millimeter hex head to get in there to hold the bolt, because the ball joint, because the ball joint will spin. That's my setup there. I'm going to use the crow's foot. But if you can't get an arrangement like this, just get it on there as tight as you can, the way you can. Not perfect, but it's close enough. Now the tie right in, and that's going to go right back in here. Put that all the way in. There it is. And now the nut for that was the castle nut, like that. Torque on that is 36 foot-pounds, and you need a new cotter key on that, and there's the part number. This is a 1/8 inch. The length doesn't really matter because you can cut it. You can see this is pretty long, like that. I'll cut that and fold it. That'll work. Let's get this bolt back in. This is a 12 millimeter for the brake line. Now let's get this axle nut. You can tighten this the same way that you loosened it. Have somebody step on the brakes for you, set up a pry bar, do the screwdriver in the rotor, whatever. Your torque is going to be 159 foot-pounds. I'm going to use the same method to tighten this as I did to remove it. So I'm going to get on there, get on this torque wrench and turn. If you use this way, don't forget the lug nuts to protect the threads. For 159 foot-pounds, I'm busting out the Big Papa torque wrench. But your half-inch drive will probably cover that range. Most of them go up to about 175 or 200. So you'll be good. If for some reason you're not, check the pinned comment in the description for a video link that'll show you how to use an extension bar or an extender bar, where you can increase the torque range on your half-inch drive torque wrench, so you don't have to buy a new one. Now put this little cap back on, like that, and you have to have it so it will be lined up with the hole over there. So you need the cotter key back through, and a new cotter key. Here are the new cotter keys. It was 64 cents or 61 cents for two of them, and the size is 5/32. Get the cotter key all the way in. Don't put it like that. Put it like that, so it'll go in all the way. Bend this one up and out, and then just cut a little off, like that. Now the ABS, if you have that, this is a 10 millimeter, and this is the one that goes where the bracket goes. And you can see the bracket, it's got that. It just goes back in that hole, right like that. It aligns real well. And then you put this 10 millimeter back in here. And then slide your ABS sensor right back in here. And then this 10 millimeter goes right in there. All right, that's it. Last check on fasteners. Make sure you have the axle nut on, the cover, and the cotter P in. Make sure your tie rod is back connected with that castle nut and the cotter key. If you have ABS, make sure ABS is back in place. Make sure your nuts are on your sway bar link. And on your ball joint, make sure you have all those 3 fasteners there. Take out any kind of wire or anything you have in here. I'm going to put this wheel back on and drop this thing. Get your wheel back on, but don't torque the lugs just yet. We'll drop it now. And go ahead and jack up the front and remove your jack stands. Slowly drop it. And now torque the wheel to 76 foot-pounds. Now we'll top off the transmission fluid. This Rav4 is an automatic, so this is the dipstick. And that's where we're going to refill. I'm going to use Toyota T4 ATF automatic transmission fluid. Next, there's the part number. As you can tell by the shape of the bottle, this is a mobile product. If you have a manual transmission, you'll be removing that 24mm drain and fluid check plug and refilling through there. So just remove this dipstick and clean it up here. Just set that to the side for a second. And grab a clean funnel. You want to pour fairly slowly because the funnel will back up some, so don't pour too fast. And push the funnel down. And when you're all done filling in whatever you removed, make sure your dipstick is clean and put your dipstick back in. Make sure it goes under that little clasp. Okay, and to make sure your transmission fluid is at the right level on your automatic, you want to go for a little drive, 10-15 minute long drive to get the engine up to operating temperature and your transmission fluid warm, and then pop the hood and get the hood up. You want to have the hood up and ready to go because you have to do these next steps quickly. Now back inside with the engine still running and your hood up and ready and a paper towel at hand, you're going to want to go into reverse, neutral, drive. You just stand in each slot for a couple seconds, all the way down to low, and then slowly go right back up. And back into park. Now we're going to quickly go outside and check the transmission fluid. Quickly get in here, grab the transmission dipstick, clean it off, and put it back in. And this is how you get a good level check. Pull it back out, and there you can see the level is good. It's right where it needs to be. It's very difficult to get the camera to pick it up, but you will be able there if you follow this light here from the flash. If you follow it down to where it stops right there, you can see that's where the level is, right there, which is where it needs to be. So when you're looking at yours, these 2 notches, and it also says hot, you might not be able to see it through the camera, but you'll be able to see it in real life. It says hot down there and it says cold down here. You want to have your transmission fluid between those 2 notches on hot. This is why you don't take the transmission fluid reading when the engine's off. This fluid is warm, but you can see the fluid levels all the way up to here, and that's what you're going to see if you check the transmission fluid after you've turned the engine off. And so the fluid level is good. You can put the transmission dipstick back in and get it fastened under there. It's been a week. I came back in here to double check that the seal is not leaking, and it is not leaking. So yeah, we're all set. I hope this video helped you, and good luck with your repair.